Um, so tonight I want to talk about the name of Yah, and I guess I'll allow people to come in and see if anybody's going to come in. But we're going to talk about it. I'd like to have it on video, really as much as possible, to be able to, you know, properly and all that I can to kind of give people the information about why our family has chosen this name, right? Or maybe work the other way around. Maybe this name chose us because it's not anything that we've done for ourselves. If we weren't in position to receive the information, then, we wouldn't have received it. And in fact, this information has been introduced to me before. And when it was introduced to me the first time, I didn't receive it. Do you understand what I mean? So it's a thing that you definitely have to be patient with because, to be honest with you, it's hard. It's a hard one. I'd say that this is one of the ones that, maybe the one that is the toughest to understand. Maybe it's hidden the deepest. I don't know. But before we get into it, I do want to allow people to join if people are going to join. If not, we'll just record this for posterity's sake. So maybe one day somebody will stumble across some of these videos and be able to glean some information and gain some perspective from them. So we're just taking our time. Shalom. Shalom, Mishpachah. Shalom, family. I'm going to go ahead and turn the comments on. I don't really know how to do that, family. Oh, he's gone. I don't know who that was, but somebody highlight saved to your channel is unlisted. I don't know what that means. I'm trying to put the comments on. So let's do all messages. So I really don't know how to put the chat up because it's not. Okay, so it's going now. Hopefully I don't have that sound, because when I was doing live the last time, there was this sound in the background, and I don't know what that's all about, but I hope that's not what's going on tonight. So we haven't got into it yet. I'm going to wait around a little longer to see if anybody pops in. But today was an interesting day. We had a herd of cows come in. I know, it's still a construction site, so we don't have everything figured out yet. So the grass is still really high. We've got somebody coming tomorrow to get it cut. So we'll get everything figured out. So I wanted to discuss tonight the reason why, the information behind why we have gone to YAOH. And been now, I suppose, 2 years that we've been worshiping under the name of Yah. And, it still has to roll off the tongue, right? When we were worshiping under the name of Yahuwah, it kind of flowed off the tongue, at least for me. I suppose it's because my palate was more comfortable with Yahoo. But this particular form that we have, embraced, YAOH, still sounds to me in my mouth a little foreign, just because, really we're getting accustomed to it. Even though it's been 2 years now, we pray every day. We pray under the YAOH every day. And then there's a bit of a distinction between two sounds, right? So people have said YAOH, right? With an audible stop between the two syllables, YAOH. That's what people have suggested to be the case. And then also the the history kind of suggests that in a spoken form, it sounded like yow. Do you see what I'm saying? Almost like YAW. So I'm, I'm not really sure exactly which one is which. I was still, trying to wait for some people to pop on here. I'm still not sure which one is which or if both. But what we, so you'll hear me pop in and out from Yao to Yao, um, on occasion. So let's get started. And I'll give you a little bit of background as to when we came into the understanding of, of the truth, which I believe to be the truth. So, we live here in West Africa. And upon coming here, we already had our eyes open for Hebrew perspective, Hebrew tradition, and Hebrew language, right? So if you look in history and your objective is to figure out the timeline of your history and figure out the places in the earth where you've been, there are certain hallmarks that um, us as Hebrews, us as, Israelites, there are certain hallmarks that we look for. And the thing is that we as Hebrews are automatically researchers, right? And so, of course, we study the Bible. We study the Bible very deeply, and we make sure that we are doing the things that the Bible prescribes, right? Living according to Elohim's law. But on top of this, we are also deeply studying the Bible to glean as much historical and physical information out of it so that we can understand the times that we're in, right? And understand our identity. And so, in doing this, the three things that we look for when we look at other cultures, try to figure out what or who it is that we're dealing with, we look at, um, and then when we are pressed up against the standard for Hebrew culture, and I say standard, I should say, when we're looking for the metric as to who by prophecy and by designation can be considered Hebrew. These are the we look for. We look for language, we look for condition, and then we look for those historical landmarks too, um, prophetic landmarks as well. So when we came here, there's a lot to say, but coming to say that when we came to West Africa, of course, our known history in the United States, our taught history in the United States is centered around West Africa, this region, Nigeria, Ghana, Angola, West Africa. And so what we've been told all our lives is that this is the place where we emerge from. This is the place where we come from. So since we believed that that's where we came from our entire life, then we started looking for Hebrew hallmarks here when we got here. That's the first thing I did, right? And so a lot of people, or not a lot of people, I actually had a teacher, one teacher. And I know a few people that have, made the journey out here, but I had a teacher, one of my best teachers. I have actually a video about him on this channel. He's one of my favorite teachers, one of my best teachers. He's a wild man, and he's, my wife wouldn't want me to say this. He's wild and crazy, but he taught me a lot of different things. One of the things that he taught me is and I've talked about this before on this channel. One of the things that he taught me was that um, in this part of the world, they have linguistic hallmarks only they can say properly, because the natural affinity to the Hebrew language appears in the people that have Hebrew origins, right? So, us being separated from the sound of the culture, we're having to reconstruct what we know to be the true sounds of the letters based on history that's left for us and what the Masoretics did. And if you guys know about the Bible that we have now, it's called the Masoretic text. What the Masorites did was codified all the sounds that Hebrew could make, like all the permutations of each sound and each letter, every style of accent, every dialect, way that the letters are pronounced in every part of the quote unquote Jewish diaspora. They cataloged it and they created a vowel pointing system around the Hebrew to historically preserve these sounds, right? And so this is why we have the Nakud pointing system, because the people, the Masoretic people, wanted to preserve the way that these sounds are spoken. And so what that screams out to us is they didn't that they weren't original to them, that this particular the way that these words sound weren't native to them, that they were actually introduced to it. And because they were introduced to it, to develop a system in which to remember it by, which is what we see in the Nakud vowel pointing system. The oldest text of the Bible, like the Dead Sea Scrolls and a couple of other old texts, don't have vowel points in them. We see the emergence of vowel points after the fall of the temple. This should give clues as to which Jews that we're talking about inserted these vowel points. And it's a big question, because there were, you know, a bunch of people groups that were claiming Jewish descent that weren't, going all the way back to the time of the Sumerians, right? And this continued on since then. So there were a lot of people groups that took um, biblical information and used it. Still, we ain't got nobody on here, and used it to benefit and claimed it as their own a lot of time. And so that's what we're seeing with the Masoretic families, both evidence for indigenous to the language that they were speaking, and evidence of revision inside the text, because these were scribal, right? So with that being said, I said all that to get to this point. The coded language that we have in the Bible, of course, is Hebrew, but the Masoretic text the Nakud vowel pointing system that surrounds it is foreign to the text. So that means that the way that things are pronounced in the Bible, the way that it says it's supposed to be pronounced, is not flexible, but their understanding of it was flexible. So they, in a lot of situations, arbitrarily added which points that they perceived. And then this gives meaning based on the particular points. And then in not every case was this vowel pointing system accurate, right? So it wasn't accurate all the time. In fact, there were many different vowel pointing systems. And the one that we have today is one that was agreed upon by a couple of Masoretic families, right? I believe this is called the Tiberian vocalization system. So that should tell you that there's a lot of play within the way that the vowels are being used in the Bible. So this should tell you that, okay, we need to examine the names in the Bible. And this is going to describe how we came up with the name of YAOH. And we didn't just come up with it. There's lots and lots and lots and lots and lots, like a ton of evidence for it. But this is where we were and how we came to this conclusion with the information that we had. And so upon looking at, different vocalization styles of the name of the Father, so before I say that, one thing that is known in the text about the name of the Father is that in the Bible, it's vowel pointed 6 different ways. It's vowel pointed Yahweh, it's vowel pointed Yahweh, the most times vowel pointed Yahweh. It's vowel pointed Yahuwah a couple times, and it's vowel pointed Yahuwah one time in the text. So we know from the start that whoever is in control of this vowel pointing system intended it to muddy the waters, right? To make murky how to pronounce the name. And that's really what they did, because with the vowel point system, they put forth a suggestion that from that point in history on down, which is we're talking about medieval Judaism, so about the 10th century AD, from that point on, that's the name that they all used. And this is centered around Gentile Judaism, right? And not even just talking about the Ashkenazim, but other Gentile Jews as well. There are more flavors of Jews that have come into the fold since way, way back, right? We have to understand that that there were lots and lots of people in the Persian Empire that became Jews. If you go back to the book of Esther, the book of Esther with Mordecai, when the king gives the edict that he gets to kill Haman and reverse the curse that was on them to go out and slay their enemies instead of being slain. And I believe this is in the last chapter or next to last chapter. A buddy of mine told me about this a very long time ago. The people that were about to come under the sword from the Jews, a lot of them converted. The scripture says made themselves Jews, which means they circumcised themselves. So you have a large amount of Gentile Jews in the congregation starting in the Persian captivity, which is about 500 BC. So from that moment onward, you have a whole lot of Gentile Jews, right? So knowing that and then going forward, you have to know that the people that were still in the regions of Israel, Babylon, Tiberias, places like that in the Middle East were Gentiles. From that point on, our people were scattered throughout Europe, throughout Africa, and from there, our culture was disseminated in many, many different places, but has since become watered down to the point of non-existence in our community. Do you understand what I'm saying? So again, we have to go back and look at these vocalization hallmarks to try to figure out what's going on. And so let's get back to, the 6 different styles of pronunciation for the Shalom, Shalom. We've got 2 people in here. Shalom, Shalom, Mishpachah. Let's get back to the 6 different ways of pronunciation in the text, in the Hebraic text that we have, of the name of the Father. And so again, I said that there was one, Yahweh, that it has it pronounced with a yod at the last vowel. There's one, of course, Yahweh, that's the most popular. Yahuwah, and then Yahuwah. And then there's one other, and I can't remember exactly which one that was. But the overwhelming majority of the time when you see the Father's name in the text, it's vowel pointed as Yahweh. And the reason why that is vowel pointed with a soft at the end is for the same reason that Moshe has a soft at the end. And that's because the Greeks disagreed with the concept of an open vowel or a hard ah vowel at the end of a male name or oh, or any of that at the end of a male name. It was associated with a feminine name. So they opted, this is where we also get Moses from, because they often put S at the end to keep it from being feminine. But this is the reason why it's vowel pointed instead of Musha, it's vowel pointed Moshe, right? And they use that same concept to determine Yahweh. And it's, of course, what's the word? It's, of course, arbitrary. It's an arbitrary designation. And the scholars will tell you that it's an arbitrary designation. This is the one that's vocalized the most in the Masoretic text, so this is the one that is used. Most scholars will tell you that the name does not go back beyond the Masoretic text, that it is unique to that style of authorship. And this is a scribal community. So again, let's jump forward. This is just establishing the fact that the names that we have, the ones that are given to us, are for the Father, for one, more than one in the text, and for two, there to make it seem as if they could be any of these suggestions. So, kind of trying to throw us off the track. Okay, so with that being said, here we are in West Africa, again, where the Hebrew people are said to have come through on their way to slavery in America. We started off talking about how we knew, before we understood that we were Hebrews, we understood that we were in West Africa as slaves. And so, us coming here to West Africa, we're looking for hallmarks of that to be the case. And since we understand that we're Hebrews, we're looking for hallmarks for that as well, right? And so what we find here, or we end up finding here, is both of those things, right? So when we down, of course, we knew that there were slave castles here. So we saw that off the bat, right? This is, a region. There's two slave castles within 10 miles of where I'm at right now. So, so we see that there's evidence of captivity being here, just like we know from history and from the history that we're familiar with from our history as African Americans. Right? What we also see is a part that we weren't familiar with. For instance, the town that is down the street from Cape Coast. So we were here in Cape Coast. So Cape Coast is an English name. So you can see English captivity. And then the town down the street from it is called Elmina, which is a Portuguese, Spanish Portuguese word. There you have the Portuguese captivity. And if you guys know, you know that historically there was a large amount of Jews during the Spanish Inquisition that were forced to leave Portugal in or around 13 to 1400 AD and were sent into West Africa to be in exile. And so here in West Africa, we developed prosperous communities in about 200 years. So in 200 years, those same Europeans that kicked us out of Portugal came back down here, got us again, and sent us to America to start the American experiment. An experiment in captivity and an experiment in witchcraft to bring about the end of the world. This is really, we're seeing the culmination of a giant satanic experiment, right? Right now, we're seeing that culmination. So, since we know all of these things, we see all these hallmarks in the history that we know of, the history that we didn't know of. Now, what do we see biblically, right? What do we see biblically to identify that our people have been here? The first thing I saw when I came here is that some people were named YAOH or YAO, YAW, right? And I thought, that's interesting because Yao or Yao has a lot of the elements that the Father's name has in it. Clearly, you have Yah, and then also you have another syllable, which is there, an O, Yao. Do you hear the Yao? Even though it's YAW, when you hear it pronounced, it sounds exactly the same as Yao. Do you understand what I'm saying? So this name, when we came to Africa, 1/7 of the population has this name Yao, because everybody that's born on Thursday is named Yao. Everybody who's born on Monday is named, oh, and I'm gonna forget. I believe it's Kwame, or maybe that's Saturday. There's Kofi, which is Friday. There's Kwame. There's, oh man, my Fonte teacher is gonna be so mad. I can't remember all the names, but there's Kwaku, Kwame, Kofi, Yao, and then there's a couple of others. There's even a name Abba Yah, as in Father Yah, right? And this is a woman's name. I believe that's a Wednesday born or Friday born woman is named Abba Yah. And so these are all Hebrew words that are intermingled with this African culture, right? And I notice it right away. I wonder what the deal is with this Yao. Do you hear? Yao, Yao. I wonder what the deal is with this. Now, by this time, we've been in the walk 6, 7 years, and we've used Yahuwah since day one. For some reason, we were not impressed with scholarship behind the designation Yahweh, and we very early on decided that that must not be it. And so, with our research, we, not understanding really the rules of Hebrew and going with what we're seeing, adopted the name Yahuwah like many others online did. And as far as I could see, this was the only option for pronunciation besides Yehovah, which I thought was very similar and interesting as well. This was the teachers, my teacher that I told you was in Ghana before I was. This was his interpretation of how the name was pronounced. And what he would tell me is, we know that these people are connected to our people because the way that they pronounce words, that in hidden within the Fanti language and the pronunciation style of Fanti and Shui and a lot of the other African languages in this region hides the vocalization for the way that the Hebrew letters are pronounced. Is, my teacher's hypothesis as to why he used the name Yehovah. And one thing that he told me was that, um, let's see, still can't figure out how to do the comments. But one thing that he told me was that the oh, oh, that sound was absolutely common in West Africa. And he was right. It's oh, oh. That sound common here. It's used in regular conversation, right? People will say, oh. It's used behind words when it doesn't feel like it should be there. I talked about it in the other video. People, when they were trying to say, sometimes they say, Gano. Oh, it's hot in Gano. That's what they would say. And I'm thinking, what is Gano? You see what I'm saying? But one thing that they like to say, one phrase that I hear all the time, it's not easy. Do you see what I mean? This is how they incorporate that term, oh. at the end of a word here in West Africa. It's very, very common, right? It's actually common in Spanish too. When we say bueno, see what I'm saying? It's a common ending for a masculine sound in Spanish. Does that make sense? And so when we look at the way that these particular West Africans are incorporating O into their language, you know, from what my teacher said, this was an ancient Hebrew sound. And this is the way that the wa was pronounced. That it was not a W sound, that it was not a V sound. It wasn't an oo sound either. It's a different, morphology from the original sound. It was an oh sound. And me, just looking at scholarship and not looking at lived practices, not looking at cultures and indigenous cultures and places, um, believed what the textbook said. The textbook informed me from class when I was educated um, uh, collegiately in Hebrew, in the Hebrew language. I took about a year and a half, yeah, a year and a half of Hebrew. The textbooks say that the oo sound for the wa is the oldest sound. It's oo, oo, and that's the oldest sound. But what my teacher told me was that the textbooks didn't know what they were talking. The people didn't say ooh, they said oh, oh. And that sound actually incorporates the ooh in it. That is oh, oh. Do you understand what I mean? And so I thought to myself, that is very strange, right? Because it sounds like something that I had heard before, something that I had heard a long, long time ago when I was in school taking Hebrew. And so I think I've told this story before. I've told a lot of this before, but I kind of wanted to do it on live so I could, get all this together in one spot. I'm sure it's in, Unlocking the Code, which is a video that I did, I suppose, about a year ago from the Theory of Everything series that I have not finished, that I do want to finish. Just a part now that's a little bit difficult to wrap all together in a, just a neat synopsis. But I will have to do those, and I may do them live. But anyway, uh, he managed to, my teacher, managed to to come to the understanding from living in Ghana himself that the ancient sound must not have been ooh, it must have been oh, based on the way that the people here pronounce their words. And he's right. Oh, because what I was talking about, what I was trying to get to, and I've told this story before, that when I was in school being taught Hebrew collegiately, there was a group of guys that would, that I would actually kind of, you know, battle with. In the religious community, especially at the Adventist community, they love biblical debate, right? And if you know anything about Israelites, they love biblical debate too. So we come from really the same school of discussion. They call it midrash, right? It's getting to the root of things. So that we in the Hebrew community we do the same thing, and we've done this for clearly thousands of years. We have thousands of years of documentation of this thing happening through Hebrew text. So the Adventists behave the same way, and they love a good biblical debate. And so there was a team of dudes, right? They were black dudes. And I would always, want you guys are Israelites, right? And so, there was two guys in particular that were kind of like a team. They worked together, really on fire for the Christian interpretation of the word and the Ellen White Adventist interpretation of the word, right? One of these guys actually, and I'm not, saying these things to make light, because it's important that you understand how deeply involved some people are in these doctrines. You even had one of one of the guys from the two-man team, uh, bind his Bible together with Ellen White's writings as if it belongs together, right? This is how serious this particular guy was about a particular flavor of Christianity, right? So this guy, that same guy, he was that half of the duo, right? This guy was taking Greek, and I was taking Hebrew, right? Or I'd already taken Hebrew, and I was getting ready to graduate, but he's taking Greek and was very good at Greek, and so I asked him, right? Whenever I needed some Greek advice or to understand better about a Greek phrase or Greek phrasing, I would always ask him because he was, my go-to guy for these Greek things. I didn't want to do Greek because even though the New Testament was in Greek, I wasn't in love with the Greek language. Do you see what I'm saying? I didn't want to waste my time learning Greek because I could always reference Greek. I wanted to spend my time in the original cultural language, which is clear, right? I do see the benefit in learning Greek because of things like I'm getting ready to tell you. Um, but I didn't, spend my time deep into Greek like some of the other guys did. Because, of course, this is a Christian class. So they're going to be more focused on quote unquote, Jesus, which means that they're more focused on Greek, right? So, with that being said, when I was doing my research on and it's not it's like a, a thesis, right? So, in order to graduate, I had to write a thesis, and it had to be, you know, comprehensive, basically. It had to contain Hebrew. It had to contain, research. It ended up being 32 pages with 5 or 6 pages of resources. So really, really researched, really detailed description on the name of the Father, right? And here's where you have to understand how the Spirit works because, how can you write 30 pages on a topic and be wrong about it? I for sure was. I wrote 32 pages on this topic with 5, 6, 7, 8 pages, and it was more than 5 pages of resources or pieces at the end of it. And, working on it for, 3, 4 months, trying to gather all these sources to prove a point that ends up just being wrong. And here's the wow part. The guy that I'm just talking about is my Greek source, my source for the Greek language and how to pronounce the words. I kept running into this strange 3-letter form of the Father's name. Let me not get subject here. I kept running into this very strange 3-letter form of the Father's name when I came across the Greek sources, right? And so these aren't, Greek sources necessarily, they're Greco Roman sources. So we're talking about a culture that was directly not only just influenced by Hebrew society, not only adjacent to Hebrew society, but responsible for destroying the last remnant of the Hebraic kingdom, on this planet, right? On this plane, whatever you want to call this place, on Earth. So this is a society that would have lived and understood well enough Hebrew culture and the people that are from the, because see, since we know that Hebrew is already tampered with, is so, watered down from the different groups of people have adopted the culture and changed it in the way that they wanted to, is watered down by the modern era, that we have to really search in alternative languages to try to figure out how our language is pronounced. We have all the ways it could be pronounced, but in order to see which ones those were, we have to go back to the ancient documents and figure out how the letters were pronounced in other languages, which you can do um, to see how the Hebrew was pronounced, back in the day, right? And so, since we have all of the sounds for Greek, because Greek existed um, to a later time, and the mosquitoes are eating me up out here, we have all sounds for Greek. So, we know how the Greek letters sound because of the way that they preserved it in Greek, and then some of the corresponding letters in Latin, and then the way that from English, the English words were um, uh, and now I can't even transliterated to mimic the sound. We know how Greek sounds, right? And so I kept coming across this weird three-letter form in Greek for the name of the Father. It was an iota, it was an alpha, and then it was an omega. Do you see what I'm saying? It was an iota, it was an alpha, and it was an omega. And I thought to myself, when I kept seeing this is a strange form that I keep running into. And I didn't run into it just once or just twice. I ran into it everywhere in the ancient world that I looked. It's so much so that I had to ignore it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Most of the ancient scholars said the Father's name was YAOH. That's what they said it was. The Greek scholars, the Roman scholars, the late ones, the early ones, they were 9 out of 10 times saying that the name was something as because in the Greek and in the Latin they don't have a Y sound. They have the iota, and it's not a yod, but it's meant to be the yod. That's the Greek representation of the yod. If you understand Hebrew language and you understand Greek language, you'll know that the letter system, both of those lettering systems, are common. And they say it's the Fiction style, but again, these lettering systems are very, very, very similar. If you know Greek, you'll know alpha, beta, gamma, delta, right? That's the first four letters of the Greek alphabet, right? If you know Hebrew, you know Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, right? And so you can see the similarities between these two alphabets. And if you understand the term alphabet, it's the same thing as alpha, beta. Do you see what I'm saying? So this is where you get some of these terms from. So let's look at the Hebrew alphabet. So you have the Greek alpha, you have the Hebrew aleph. And we know, of course, the Hebrew is much older. You have the Greek beta and the Hebrew bet. Do you see how this is the same language? You have the Greek gamma and you have the Hebrew gimel. Do you see what I'm saying? And then you have the Greek delta and the Hebrew dalet. Because in Hebrew, the alphabet is actually called the alphabet, and it's uh, the lettering system that has been used for thousands of years. Greeks were really the last ones to adopt it, in the history of alphabets, in the history of lettering systems. The Greeks were the last to kind of, and they grabbed it backwards. That's why we write from left to right now, because the Greeks took it and wrote from left to right, when the Hebrews wrote from right to left, which is really more natural, right? So, so with that being said, I came across the three-letter, what is called the Trigrammaton. There's even a name for it. It appears so often. It's called the Trigrammaton. You guys might have heard of the Tetragrammaton, right? And this is what is universally known for the name of the Father, YAOH. That's the Tetragrammaton. That's the name of it. You look up Tetragrammaton and it'll give you the name of the Father. What it means is four letters. And so what I kept running into in Greek sources was the Trigrammaton, or the Trigrammaton, which means three letters. And so it confused the crap out of me. Like, why do I keep running into this? Why is it so easy to drop this letter at the end of the first name? Shouldn't these Greek authors have been trying to spell Yahweh or Yahuwah? They didn't, right? And you could have, uh, you could have accounted it for the fact that they didn't like the open O's at the end. But again, this is not what they're saying that they're doing. There's no record of them saying, oh, okay, well, we don't do the open ended on the father's name, or we're dropping this on the end of the father's name because it sounds feminine. No, they're saying that this is the way that we've heard it pronounced. This is what the church fathers are saying. This is what we've heard pronounced. The iota, the alpha, and the omega. And it comes out as YAOH or YAOH. The iota is the IA. This is the closest way that they could come up to the Y or the yod with a ya sound, a y sound. So they got the iota, they've got the aleph or the alpha, which is an ah, which is an open ah, and then they have the omega, which is o, right? And I asked my Greek studies buddy, who I was with you guys about a little while ago, I asked him and I said, how is these three letters pronounced? He said, it's pronounced Yao or Yao. And I said, it's not pronounced Yahoo? And he said, nope. And he, of course, says it with a snicker because he knows that I'm doing this Yahuwah project and that this doesn't match with Yahuwah. And he's like, no, it's not pronounced Yahoo. That's not what that says. That says Yah-oh. I said, are you sure? He said, uh-huh, absolutely. Because if it was Yahoo or Yah-oo, it would have been this letter. Because there is a letter in the Greek alphabet that makes the oo sound. I think it's oopsilon, something to that of that nature. And I said, oh, interesting. And then promptly filed that away in my mental uh, Rolodex to say I'll have to deal with that at some point in my life, but not right now when I'm getting ready to graduate college and turn this paper in. And it wasn't if I was convinced either, because I said, this is a problem, but this problem is not big enough in my mind to reconsider what I see as far as my interpretation of what I'm seeing, right? Just common sense trying to put four letters together and incorporating each sound into, right? And I'm running out of battery time, and I've still got kind of a lot of time, a lot of more to tell about this subject. But I want to really get a comprehensive video out to try to get people to understand how sure this is, because this pronunciation is fairly sure. And I guess you can't say fairly sure, but I will say it's founded, it's sturdy, it withstands the test of time. There's a lot of evidence for it, and it's not obvious. Do you see what I'm saying? The pronunciation is not obvious. It really has to be, even though it's easy, it's not obvious, right? And so I'm getting eaten alive out here, but we're gonna keep going, right? So I'm hit with this problem, but I file it away in my mental Rolodex and I continue to keep going. So again, when I get to West Africa and I see Yao, I recognize it because I had seen it before in ancient history from the Greeks trying to pronounce the name of the Father. Do you understand what I mean? In my mind, it clicks saying, these two things match. You have ancient Hebrews being in a place. You have the name Yao, which technically sounds like Yao. And then you have the ancient Greeks saying that the name that they heard Hebrews pronouncing was Yao. Do you understand what I mean? this starts to make sense. And then when you see, the search engine Yahoo on the billboards here, when they spell oh, when they spell that, they don't spell it the same way that we would spell oh. They spell it O, or oh. That's oh. So if they looked at Yahoo without knowing the way that it was is spelled in English, they would pronounce it Yah-oh. Do you understand? Here we are in the modern era with the Father's name as one of the most popular words in the world, with it just barely mispronounced as Yahoo instead of Yah-oh, because of the misunderstanding that we have that they've hoisted upon us. And it's used as an exclamation, as a happy thing, as a praise for some good thing that happened. We say, Yahoo, right? That's what we say. But the exclamation is really meant to be pronounced as Yah-oh, as a praise. Do you hear it? And then we found, and there was a specific place that I was going to go, but and I know where I want to get to, but there was something I wanted to say first that has slipped my mind. But we are just confronted with an abundance of evidence, both in modern day, in ancient time, you know, and in the text. This is where I wanted to go. In the text, there's a great mystery in the text, right? Because if you understood the way that the name is written in men's names, like you see that you have Nehemiah, you see that you have Jeremiah, you see that you have Obadiah, you see that you have Hezekiah, and all of these different Josiah, all of these different ayah names, right? And so if you go into the Hebrew, you'll recognize that the Jeremiah comes from, again, the Greek pronunciation in a way to try to hide the real way to pronounce it. Jeremiah, right? So in Hebrew, Jeremiah's name is Yirmiyahu. This is what they'll tell you. Yirmiyahu, right? Um, so the Yahoo at the end of the name is a form, of course, of the name of the Father. But in Tetragrammaton, whenever the Father's name is used, it's always a four-letter interpretation or a four-letter word. Yod, He, Wah-He. And this is where we came up with Yahuwah, because we had Yah in the first syllable, and then we saw Wah-He. So we associated Wah-He with Uwa, because the Wah was an U sound. This is what the textbook tells us. And then the Hey is an Ah sound, because we've seen it in other places as an Ah sound. In the first syllable, see it as an Ah sound, right? So this is what we come up with, not understanding Hebrew forms and Hebrew grammar patterns, right? So it dawned on me that Yahuwah, Yod He Wah He, could also be pronounced Yah-oh. If you take the ancient Oh that's found here in Africa, apply it to the Holam Wa, which we know makes traditionally an Oh sound. We know that, right? And for one, in Shalom, right? Shalom, Om. We know it traditionally takes an O sound. We know in some places it takes an U sound, but the most ancient terms we see are with O sounds, right? And so when we take that and apply the hey to the end of it, because the hey is really an H sound, it's ha, right? And so when you spell the word O, okay, O, like a revelation O, you spell it OH. So if you have an understanding of the way that the words work, we know it's Yah, in the first syllable, and it's formed Yah because the Yod intrinsically has an Ah sound that is represented when it's next accompanied with a Hey, right? Yah is extended Yah. But the Wah sound or the Oh sound with the Holam Wah is not intrinsically Ah, it's intrinsically Oh. And the Hey at the end of it accentuates the sound. It lets you know that this is not Uah, that it's Oh. In English, OH is Oh, right? Oh. Do you hear? Oh. And so when you put these two together, it becomes YAOH. And so then, when I was wondering why in the world do you never see as Jeremiah in the text, you always see Yirmiyahu. You never see Yirmiyahuah. The hay falls off every single time. It falls off every time. There is not one instance in the text where it says, in the name of person, the full four-letter tetragrammaton. It's always the three-letter trigrammaton, which we know as YAOH from Greek understanding. Then all of a sudden, the name of the Father makes sense. If that hey at the end just represents the full sound of the O, it's not always necessary. You can say YAOH and you can spell it Y-A-O or YAOH, right? And still maintain the singularity of worship and the integrity of the sound. YAOH can be spelled a number of different ways. It could even be spelled Y-A-W, Yao. It could be spelled Y-A-O-U, Yao. Do you hear it? Do you hear how that merges all the instances that we see in the text? Can you see the name of John? We've always thought it was Yahukanan, but in this form is Yaohanan. You hear it? Yaohanan. That's why some names are just Yo, right? Because Yo is the same thing as Yao. You hear Joel's name spelled Yod, Wa, Aleph, Lamed. It's Yoel, Yo, as in Yao is Elohim, Yaoel. Can you hear how that comes Joel? What about Yahusha, the name of the mayor? Yahusha. Do you hear it? This unifies everything. This pronunciation is singular. Yahweh, your Elohim, is one. We understand that you have Yah as the shortened form, but we understand Yahweh as the way that it's pronounced in its full form and the way that is recognized by every theophoric name that is in the text. It matches with even with Joel, because we know in Joel the hey is missing there too. It's not Yod Hey Wah in Joel, it's Yod Wah. So that's the same because it's Yao, Yao, Yoel. And people heard Yoel, Y-O-A-L, Yoel, Yaoel, Yoel. Yao is Elohim. Do you hear? Why do you think Joseph is spelled or pronounced Joseph? It's Yosef, Yosef. Do you hear it? That could be Yosef. That's what you hear, Yosef. If you say it in lived language, Joseph becomes a reality. And it means Yao has added. Yao has added. Do you understand? This is a formula that works for every iteration of the Father's name. It works in theophoric names. It works across the board. You don't have to change anything. Yo, as spelled Yod Wah, as spelled Yod Hey Wah, and as spelled Yod Hey Wah Hey. It's all YAOH, YAOH. Do you understand? And so this singularity of style, this, pronouncement of oneness is how we understand with surety that the Father's name has to be Yahweh. Because now, if we just go back and outline where we've seen this name Yahweh, we've seen it in ancient Greco-Roman attempts at transliterating his name into Greek and Latin from people that were worshiping among Hebrews, listening to Hebrews, and writing down from Hebrews the things that they heard right in the center of Yahushua's time frame. In Yahushua's time frame, you have people trying to pronounce the name. Within 100 years, you have writers trying to pronounce the name and transliterating it as YAOH. YAOH is, the iota, the alpha, and the omega, right? That's the first reference. You have reference of Yao in the text when you see it as the trigram in the end of people's names and at the beginning of people's names, as in Yahushaphat, King of Israel, King of Judah, Yahushaphat, and as in Hazak Yao, because people have been saying Hezekiah is spelled literally Hazak Yao, as in Yirmiyahu, and in the forms when lots of members of the components of the name is missing, like in Yoel for Joel, and in Yosef for Joseph, and in Yohanan for John. Do you see what I'm saying? The last component, so we see the component in ancient transliteration around a contemporary that would be in the community of Hebrew people. We've seen that connection. We've seen the connection in the text with the trigram being essentially equal to the tetragram. And now here in West Africa, in a place where we know people have been, because we see the curses, we see the people in America still today. In a place where the Hebrews were enslaved here, we have the name Yao as a common name, as a landmark for a place or in a place where his people have been. It's a harmonious expression of oneness throughout history, throughout cultures, and throughout language. It just makes so much sense, you guys. All right, that's really all I have. And I hope this has been comprehensive enough for people to kind of get the way that it works, right? To come together. There's one last thing that I've mentioned in the other videos that I think the word is remiss if I don't mention it here, because part of coming into this information, I stumbled on a very, 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 very interesting fact that everybody would associate with right off the bat. In English, there's actually an English word that has the name Yao in it, in a name that we're very familiar with. Have you guys, of course, you guys have heard the name Matthew. So why in the world is it pronounced Matthew? The Hebrew name, of course, we know Matthew is the tax collector that became an apostle of Yahushua in the New Testament. And of course, he's the writer of the first gospel, right? So they call him Matthew because, of course, that's a butchering of his Hebrew name, which we have always been told is Mattiyahu, right? Is Mattiyahu, right? But when you start, which means gift of Yah, right? That's what it means. So when you start trying to break down the name Matthew, and you have all this understanding, Listen to the morphology. Listen to the way that the sound comes out of your mouth and how it could have been heard to 4 years, right? So the name is Matityahu. Matityahu. That means the gift of Yao, right? That's his name. So Matyahu, 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 Matthew, Matthew. Do you hear it? Do you hear that after thousands of years of people saying Matyahu, that people that are coming from another culture might hear Matthew? Matthew. The name Yao is hidden in people's names right now that don't even know it's there and are saying it nearly correctly and have no idea. So the next time you hear the term Matthew, you keep that in your mind that is pronounced Matthew, and it means gift of Yao, right? It is a gift because it's the most powerful word in all of history, right? You call on the name of Yao and you will be delivered. Hallelujah, right? Okay, you guys, that's all I got. So I hope it was helpful for you. I've been wanting to do this for a little while, and I've done it before, but I wanted to really do it live and be able to, express to you guys, the seriousness of this because it's world changing. There's a few groups online that have come to this same conclusion, but they are very small groups and they are few and far between, right? There's really one group in particular that has kind of taken the spear, like the forefront of this information. And it was a lot of their research that I used to confirm a lot of what, and led me down trails to confirm what we've spoken about tonight. So it's been edifying for everybody. Hallelujah for those that understand. And then we know one day we'll all be in the same understanding. But until we get there, we will continue to put the pieces together to try to get this thing right. I hope this has been edifying to you guys. Shalom, shalom, mishpachah.